Imagine a world without choices. Imagine you can't make your own decision. That wouldn't be a world for me. That wouldn't be a world for you. You, I see. Tell them they're gonna be stronger. Together we can make it right. Our purpose is a better Jamaica for you and I. Gonna be stronger together. Time we all just unify. Our purpose is a better Jamaica for you and I. It is a natural right for every human being to be free. Free, so free. So the government is there to protect you and me. UIC objective is to liberate the citizens from colonial bondage, them regulation, them taxation. Rob Jamaica, we independent. Be stronger together we can make it right. Our purpose is a better Jamaica for you and I. We're gonna be stronger together.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of UIC Liberty TV. I'm Joseph Patterson. Tonight we're going to be talking about sex, sexuality, and the globalist agenda. Quite a power-packed topic, if you will. We're going to be looking at how people feel about some of the issues surrounding, same-sex relationships, transgenderism, and a host of other things that kind of mixes together with the issue of the global agenda. As you all know, there are some people with a global agenda for the world, the way they think the world should be shaped, how they think the world should be designed, what kind of laws we should have, what kind of social norms we should have, and all of that combines to form the geopolitical environment in which we live and exist. Jamaica is just one of many countries, and so we're affected by these things, and we have to understand them, take a position, and deal with them in a way that protect the interests of the Jamaican people. And so tonight I want to talk about those. So welcome JMH, good to see you on. BAU, For the Truth, good to see you on. Good night. And Peter White and Nezook Komodo, blessings, good to see you all on. Sorry. So if all goes well, I will have Jerome Jackson on with me tonight to dissect this topic. Otherwise, I might be here by myself, which is fine. I have no problem with that. But quick shout out to all the people on all the various platforms. Do me a favor, no? And just like up the thing, share, comment, and if you have not yet done so, please subscribe to UIC Liberty TV or to UIC Jamaica, whichever of the YouTube channels you're on. And if you're on one of our other platforms like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, please go ahead and subscribe, and please share with all your family and friends. Yeah, so quick reminder as well, come Saturday, June 10th, 4 p.m., we meet at Mandela Park for our We the People Rise Up Jamaica rally. It promises to be a very big event with Jamaicans coming from all parts of the country to come together to raise our collective voice and demand good governance now. There will be a number of persons participating, different speakers, different performers, as we engage in a very good time, a rally, where we're going to learn more about the policies and programs of the UIC, the mission, the objectives, and what we're going to do about the direction that the country has been taking under these two colonial parties. Welcome, Rise JA. Rise JA, so if you become Prime Minister of Jamaica, will you legalize abortion and legalize gay marriage and legalize buggery? Because Jamaicans not voting for any PM who will legalize these things. Thanks for your question, Rise JA. I will answer them in the course of tonight's presentation. Welcome, Sonia Mignot. Good evening to you. Patricia Borges, good to see you on as well. Hope I pronounced your name correctly. Pretty soon, straight people will be going under the bed while they come out of the closet. Very interesting point, BAU. I think that's the direction they want it to go, so you're not too far from the truth there. So we have to really deal with that. All right, so the room is hotting up already. Some strong opinions are being raised on the subject matter. We all know that Jamaicans have very strong opinions on any and every topic, and this one is one where we have some very strong opinions. Earlier in the day, I had a chat with a young man who is leading, what is it called? He's leading the Love March movement. I think his name is Dr. Daniel Thomas. I had a chat with him about, UIC's policies versus his thought processes. And if we're fortunate, I'll have him on, not tonight, but another day, where we can talk about, what the Love March movement is about, what they're trying to achieve, and how important they are to the dialogue concerning the issue of homosexuality and transgenderism and other social, cultural imperialism, which seems to be taking place. Good night, Ventus Brown. Good to see you on, all the way from the UK. It should be very late for you right now, or early morning actually. Welcome, cool guy. Welcome. All right, so let's get into the subject for today. I'd love to kick this off by us, first of all, kind of having an understanding of what globalization is, what globalism is, and who a globalist is. So globalization, globalism, and who a globalist is. If we understand those terminologies, then everything else we talk about tonight, you'll be able to put into context. Globalization is one thing, which is really the idea of having a global community where we all trade with each other. Globalism is more of a particular mission to create more or less a one world government where we kind of have everything in common. So we have a common set of values and common economy, and we're all kind of citizens of the world. There are no boundaries, no borders per se, and so on. And then there's the globalist, which are those persons who are trying to realize those objectives. Now, there are variations among all of these, right? Various, kind of persuasions in all of this. Where we have some challenges is where any of this creates an environment where we lose our individual liberty, where we lose our personal sovereignty, where we lose the right to make choices for ourselves, because some people have decided that they know what's best for us, and they're going to set up some standards and push those standards down on us, and we must follow them regardless. So, for example, if they think that in order to eradicate a particular disease, they're going to prescribe a particular medication, and that's going to transcend all countries and all laws and mandate it for every single man, woman, and child on the earth, then you have a problem. And we have recently experienced a small dose of that. You'll also see cases where they might believe a particular lifestyle is good for society, or should be promoted in society, or should be protected in society, and then they will pursue that agenda to say they want to push this through. So we have to be careful that we're not misled by just the general titles. We need to get into the weeds and understand where these people, whoever they are, want to take us, whether they're rich and famous, or they're philosophical, or it's a kid that becomes a sensation that represents a particular thought process at the time. We still need to be very careful about all of it and question everything. the UIC will always come down on the side of protecting your individual rights and limiting government to its respective role of protecting our rights without advocating for or pushing for any particular agenda, except in the initial stages of a UIC government, we have to undo some problems before. So, for example, we're going to have a very strong policy of land reparation to make sure all Jamaicans get the land that was stolen from their ancestors for some 400 or 500 years, and which has been withheld by our local politicians for the last 60, 80 years. So there are some remedial things that needs to be done to fix that. You'll also see that in our education policy, where we are committed to an Afrocentric education curriculum that repairs the mind, reparation of the mind, repair our people to have a sense of pride again, a sense of appreciation again, a sense of understanding of who the African is, and to be proud of, or to be not so much proud of, but to be comfortable in our skin and to understand our history, not just from a slavery perspective, but what it takes to have and to hold our freedom. So welcome, Nunya, I think it is. Welcome, good to see you on. And Christopher Lawrence, good to see you on as well. So I want to share with you a quick video, which will kind of explain this globalism thing a bit more. And then we're going to go into discussing the sex, the sexuality, and the UIC's response to all of these matters. So let's begin with that. Hopefully I can show you that. Here it goes.
Many Americans fear globalists. But what exactly is a globalist? And why do people oppose globalism? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Depending on what corners of the internet you hang out in, you've probably heard different things about the term globalism. To some, it's a new socialist world order, or just a far-right conspiracy theory, or the latest Instagram trend. Global core is the new cottage core. To some, globalism is a good thing, while to others it's evil, just like Instagram. So what is globalism? Globalism often gets confused with globalization. Globalization is an economic process. It's where nations interact through the trade of technology, products, information, and jobs. There are definitely pros and cons to globalization, but that's not the topic for today. But globalism, that's not an economic process. It refers to an ideology. The ideology of globalism promotes the idea that all people are citizens of the world, rather than a country. In its most extreme form, there would be no barriers to migration, and no group identity based on nationality. International governmental organizations would be more powerful than individual governments. Some people say this would eventually lead to a unified world government. People who believe in globalism are called globalists. People who use the term globalist generally use it in a derogatory sense. For example, former President Trump used the term when talking about outsourcing jobs, open borders, or perpetuating forever wars.
The future does not belong to globalists. The future belongs to patriots.
The term globalist is frequently used by conservatives to criticize leaders on the left, who they say put other people's or countries' interests above America's. In turn, liberals accuse conservatives of promoting isolationism, which is where a country walls itself off from the rest of the world, also known as what everyone did in 2020. You know it's bad when instead of meeting in person, the UN met on Animal Crossing. Whether intentionally or not, liberals often conflate globalism, which is about ideas like a unified world government and no borders, with globalization, which is about economic interdependence among nations. Liberals have also pushed the claim that the word globalist is actually anti-Semitic.
But make no mistake, where the term originates from is a reference to Jewish people who are seen as having allegiances not to their countries of origin like the United States, but to some global conspiracy. That's where the term comes from. The term globalist is hateful, and that is how we should see it.
But the term globalist, as many on the right use it, has nothing to do with Jewish people. I'll explain after the break. Welcome back. When people refer to someone as a globalist, they're referring to people who have broadly two main goals. The first one is collective decision-making. Globalists see the world as a collection of one big people, rather than groups divided up by nations. Some argue that there needs to be more collective decision-making because, as the World Economic Forum puts it, global issues require global solutions. They argue that the complexity of the global issues is far too big for any party to tackle alone, which is why globalists push for what's called global rule of law. It's the idea that a higher authority can and should override individual countries' authority. And it requires governments, corporations, and organizations to put international law above their own self-interest. Someone needs to rein in these transnational organizations, like Krispy Kreme. Stop spelling things with K's. That should definitely be illegal. Global rule of law could be a good thing if, for example, there are international laws that prevent countries from persecuting their own citizens. But as we've seen time and time again, authoritarian regimes often just ignore international laws they don't like. Take China, which has been a signatory to the UN Convention Against Torture since 1988. That hasn't exactly stopped it from torturing its people. Then there's the issue of state sovereignty. If international law takes precedence over national law, how can a country protect its people? And would there still be countries if governments can't pass laws that go against international laws? The second goal of globalists is to have collective values. Globalists generally want international coordination to fight against global threats like climate change, war, poverty, and disease. One way they want to accomplish that is through global citizenship, the idea that we value our common humanity above all else. Globalists think that by being a global citizen, we will have more empathy for others, regardless of their race, religion, ethnicity, or where they come from. It's not just academics or people in government who have such optimistic views of globalism, though. Big tech companies like Facebook are looking into ways to promote their idea of collective values. Collective values like storing barbecue sauce on your bookshelf. In his 2017 Facebook manifesto, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg wondered how we can help people build an inclusive community that reflects our collective values and common humanity. His solution? Establish a new process for citizens worldwide to participate in collective decision-making by exploring how collective decision-making might work at scale. What does that look like in practice? Well, by having community standards that reflect our collective values for what should and should not be allowed. This, of course, leads to a lot of problems. There are many different values in any given society, not to mention between societies. Big tech companies like Facebook and YouTube know this because when they set up community guidelines, they have to conform to some people's values and not to others. But even if we manage to somehow get everyone on board with common values, there are other problems with the globalist movement. I'll explain more after the break.
This thing on? Hey, I want to show you something real quick, but you're only...
Welcome back. Globalists believe that the interests of the collective world should trump the interests of individual countries. It's the whole greatest good for the greatest number of people thing on a global scale. But who decides what is the greatest good? And how are they held accountable? Those who are against globalism argue there's a lack of accountability among globalist elites, whether in government or the private sector. Take big tech, for example. Like I mentioned earlier, big tech companies talk about collective values, but they ultimately decide what those values are.
Technology companies actually have sovereignty over their digital space. They not only determine like what the rules are going to be, but they actually create it from the ground up. They're the architects. They drive the algorithms. They own the data. They decide what to do with it.
And as a consequence, they exercise a level of sovereignty that makes it very hard both to understand what is driving their business and to think about how one might go about regulating it.
If individual governments can't police big tech companies, who does police them? Consumers? Shareholders? Krispy Kreme? This becomes a bigger and bigger issue as more of us rely on a small number of big tech companies to conduct business and earn a living. If your business takes place mainly using Facebook, you have to conform to Facebook's rules or you could lose your livelihood. Then there are the issues of the elites who run global institutions. To see some of the problems with global governance, you only need to look at the United Nations. The UN was meant to be a body where the world's nations could come together and work out their differences so that they didn't need to resort to war. That sounds good, and there are instances of countries resolving their disputes through the UN. But the UN has also generated a lot of controversy because there's been a lot of corruption. Not to mention, it's been hijacked by authoritarian countries. Take the UN Human Rights Council, for example. Some of the most egregious human rights abusers sit on that council, like Russia, China, and Cuba. That's like having an International Nutrition Council run by Krispy Kreme. If you want to know more about the UN Human Rights Council, check out the previous video we did on it. I'll put a link to it in the description below. So in summary, globalism is an ideology that claims to find global solutions to solve global problems. But it also enables a small group of unaccountable decision makers to run the world. Which would you choose? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you like the show, please know we could not do it without.
All right, so I hope you got a good understanding of globalization, globalism, and who a globalist is from that short video. The bottom line is that globalism and globalists are about creating a world that is controlled by a few people. To understand this world, you could go and visit the World Economic Forum's website. And I'll read an excerpt for you from their mission, the section of their website that speaks to the mission. It's weforum.org. So the World Economic Forum, which is one of the leading institutions guiding the globalist agenda or globalism, which is to really create one world that is devoid of nations. So you remove nation states and you have one world. So you have one world government. And we're not far from that, even though you're still having elections in different countries. Many of those countries are governed by international law. And the question is, where does those international laws come from, since we didn't elect those international people that are making those laws that are then passed down, and our countries like Jamaica sign off on this and become signatories to these things without even bringing those to the people of Jamaica and having discussions and debates and having that as part of their platform, where we then vote to say we want to be a part of that and therefore become locked into these international treaties. So our politicians are taking us down a very slippery slope, slightly, gradually, year after year, more and more, to the point where one day you'll wake up, for example, and you can no longer practice agriculture the way you want. You can no longer practice medicine the way you want. And right now, many of those things, you don't even realize it already happening. For example, the laws you have in Jamaica that this defines medicine and defines what can be practiced and defines a healthcare system is not indigenous to us. It's not our own making. We have simply taken what others told us, what others dictate to us, and we have made that the norm. The people grow up in it and become feel like this is normal. This is how a healthcare system should be designed, or this is how an education system should be designed, or this is how a political system should be designed. And we just kind of follow along until it becomes a part of our culture, a part of our norms. And we don't even realize that we have been co-opted into something that is destroying us. Our farmers, for example, had no idea when they were getting free seeds from the government that they were wiping out organic seeds and making us dependent on GMO seeds. When they were getting the free fertilizers from the politicians, they had no idea that our politicians were working on behalf of international companies and conglomerates and corporations and governments that wants to make our farmers dependent on imported fertilizer, as opposed to creating our own fertilizers and building our own agricultural industry around practices that would protect our health, protect our families, protect our environment. So a lot of what we're used to today are already the result of globalization and globalism. And so, we should be surprised, about the whole thing. We should be shocked. But the truth is, it's already happening en masse. And we felt it powerfully during the COVID cycle, where you saw how aggressively our government, regardless of what we thought, 80% of us are saying no, 70% at one point, and they still, pushed on as much as they could. And even right now, behind the scenes, they're busy inoculating as many of our children as possible, young people as possible, under pretext of you need to do this in order to get into a program. You must take this to get into a school. You must take this to get a job. If you're applying to the police force, you have to take this or your application will not be considered. So our government is busy violating our own rights right now in front of our eyes through various means. And so we have to be aware. Now, on the World Economic Forum website, this is what they describe themselves as. The World Economic Forum is the international organization for public-private cooperation. So they are the international organization for public-private cooperation. What does that mean? It means that they are here to facilitate a cooperation between our government and the private sector. And by private sector, they don't mean us in general. They mean a subset of the private sector. The corporate elites, normally the biggest and richest, most powerful companies and the most powerful and richest men and women, they want to join in partnership, the government and these big money organizations like Big Pharma, Big Data, for the government to form cooperation with them to do good, to do what is best for all of us. So behind closed door, our government will sit down with big money, big tech, big data, big pharma, and they will make decisions together as a corporation, as a partnership, what is best for we, the little people out here, without even consulting with us. And even if they consult with us, it is done in a fraudulent manner because they use nice words, nice phrases like they're protecting our environment or they're protecting our species or they're protecting our health. And in this, while they're busy really building a solution that will deny you your rights. For example, solutions that will make you dependent on a pharmaceutical drug, for example. Solutions that will eliminate certain products or services that are being offered by the small men and women in our society and replace them with only big business. For example, you might recall during the so-called pandemic that they locked down all of the small businesses and put many of them out of business. But the public-private partnership meant all the big companies or big tourist attractions or big cruise liners, they were allowed to operate, while the small men, small women doing small businesses and medium businesses, they were crippled, crushed, and sometimes completely eliminated. So be careful of these nice sounding words like public-private partnership. It's dangerous. So here's the rest of the World Economic Forum. The forum engages the foremost political, business, cultural, and other leaders of society to shape global, regional, and industry agendas. I hope you get that. So they're focused on everything, political, business, cultural, don't miss that one, cultural, and other leaders of society to shape global, regional, and industry agenda. So if any one of you believe a monopoly is bad, a monopoly is where you have a company that has there's no more competition. You have removed all the competition, and that company is the only company providing that particular product in the environment, in the economy, and you've shut down, eliminated, annihilated all the other competition. So you have a monopoly. This kind of approach that they're pursuing, which sounds nice, creates just that, a global monopoly where a handful of companies, a handful of very wealthy people, from banking to pharmaceutical to food to data and information, a handful of companies coming together with a global governance structure to have monopolistic dominance over our entire lives. So they'll control everything from the food that you eat, the education that your kids get in school, the medication that is available to you, the financial investment options that you may engage in for your retirement planning, everything. They cover the entire spectrum. And while you may have the mistaken belief that you're free because you tend to have different flavors of the same cereal in front of you, it's one cereal company. And the cereal company has Cheerios, Kellogg's, whatever, different brands, but they're all owned by the same company. It's the same idea. So you'll get what appears to be choices in front of you, but they're manipulated choices. They're choices which are there because they have artificially excluded the competition and narrowed your choices, controlled your government, and therefore control your life overall. Okay? So it says it was established in 1971 as a non-profit foundation and is headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. It is independent, impartial, and not tied to any special interest. That's laughable. The World Economic Forum is not tied to any special interest, it says. Well, if you consider big business not to be a special interest, if you consider a group of people who think they know what is best for all the rest of us and that they're sitting and planning what they think is best for us, if you don't think that is special interest, I do not know what is. The forum strives in all its efforts to demonstrate entrepreneurship in the global public interest while upholding the highest standards of governance. Moral and intellectual integrity is at the heart of everything it does. Now, these are all lovely words, which means absolutely nothing, except that their morals and their intellect and their design for our lives is all that really matters. Yeah, that's all that really matters. So I won't read the rest. You can go and check it out. But the World Economic Forum, WEF, is a very, very dangerous organization that comes to us like an angel of light. But at the end of the day, it has no good intentions except to control your life and mine. And they've taught our politicians. They've taken them. Many of our politicians have gone to their meetings, have gone to their training sessions, and they have been trained and guided. If you read through all of what's on the World Economic Forum, you can go back and listen to the Prime Minister's speeches, and you'll see many of their words and phrases through and throughout what he's saying, because he has been fully indoctrinated. The entire government, both sides, Mark, Andrew, Lisa, Crawford, Green, all of them have been fully indoctrinated in this, and they all subscribe to this, and their job is to operate as the puppets that carry out the mission here. As a matter of fact, recently they called the Prime Minister the champion of their efforts. He's a champion for what they want to be done to the Jamaican people. Now, let me shift gears a little bit now and talk about I want to now go to an issue which I know many of you want to hear about, which is the sex issue and the sexuality issue. You know, sex as in gender and sexuality as in sexual practices, and how this relates to this global agenda. But before I do that, let me play for you something. Now, many of you don't like Donald Trump, right? Many people don't like Donald Trump. He's a horrible fellow. He's rude. He's not a very likable fellow. Now, for me, I don't care whether you're likable or not likable. What I care about is whether what you have to say is right or wrong. That's what matters to me. So if you're an atheist and you say what is right, I'm going to accept it. If you are a Muslim and you say what is right, I'm going to accept it. If you're a Hindu, if you are even a dictator, but you said the right thing, you said something which is profound and it is correct, it doesn't matter to me who you are, as long as what you're saying is factual, truthful, and meaningful and helpful. So I want to play for you a clip of Donald Trump's speech, a short part of his speech to the United Nations, which is one of the greatest globalist organization on the planet, which comes to you as an angel of light, but has some very, 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 very destructive plans, nicely laid out, skillfully garnished with beautiful words and nice meetings and presentation. But this gentleman went to their convention and had some very interesting words to share with them. And I believe those words are powerful and profound, and ones that we forget about the person who said it, but just listen to exactly what he has said. You may not like him, and that's fine. You don't need to like him. But I want you to pay attention to every word which he says and see if those words do not apply to us. See if you would rather Andrew's words or if you'd rather these words, which in my opinion fully reflects my personal views. Whether or not you like the man, I don't care. All I care about is what he said and who he said it to and where he said it and how significant it is to our struggle here in Jamaica to defend and protect our individual liberty, our personal sovereignty, our collective sovereignty. And that is why I'm playing this video for you tonight. Listen in.
The free world must embrace its national foundations. It must not attempt to erase them or replace them. Looking around and all over this large, magnificent planet, the truth is plain to see. If you want freedom, take pride in your country. If you want democracy, hold on to your sovereignty. And if you want peace, love your nation. Wise leaders always put the good of their own people and their own country first. The future does not belong to globalists. The future belongs to patriots. The future belongs to sovereign and independent nations who protect their citizens, respect their neighbors, and honor the differences that make each country special and unique. It is why we in the United States have embarked on an exciting program of national renewal.
Yeah, so there you have it. I would much rather having a leader who is focused on defending the rights and freedoms of his people, not a leader who is focused on advancing the interests of other people, not a leader who is a puppet of other nations, not a leader who is willing to sacrifice his people because another country offers him or her a lot of money to do so. We need in Jamaica principled leaders, leaders who understand the fundamental principle that the rights of every citizen is what you were or should have been elected to protect. And that not because you're in government or elected to government, however illegitimate that might be, that you should think that you have the right to determine what's best for every single citizen, that you have the right to violate anyone's choice, the right for them to choose what medication to take, to choose what food they want to eat, to choose what they want their children to learn, and so on. So I want us to be very aware of where the government is taking us. And you're going to see that in all the decisions they've taken over the last 7 years, over the last 20 years, over the last 60 years, over the last 80 years. Where has the governments of Jamaica been taking us? Now, Marcus Garvey warned us a long time ago. He says, any leadership that leads you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will lead you right back into slavery. And if you look at where these two colonial parties have been leading us, you should clearly see where they're sending us. And so, let me see here before I go on. Somebody is saying Conjure is sneaky. Absolutely. And another person that we've lost our moral compass. It is funny, Donald Trump was well liked when he was a game show host and before, hanging with, okay, so that's another comment there. Now, let's now look at the issue of transgenderism and the issue of homosexuality. Let's now talk about that, right? I'm going to begin by asking a few questions. What is your gender? What is your gender, and who decides that? Who decides what your gender is? What really is your gender? Should we be confused about that? Is that something we should be confused about and trying to figure out what our gender is? Mr. Chase said, evil is allowed to spread when good people watch and do nothing. Absolutely. Absolutely. Sonia Ellis says, are you saying that each person in a country must have the right to do whatever he or she wants to do? That looks like a recipe for disaster. That would be a recipe for disaster, Sonia. No, we're not saying that. So keep listening and you'll learn. Niga Stoney says, Mr. Patterson, my gender is male, man, and that is what you give. Okay, got it. So what is your gender? Yeah, what is your gender? Now, I've seen discussions on television shows, particularly in the US, where persons of a particular political party has a hard time defining their gender. They start to get confused. Somebody asks them, what is your gender? And they're trying to get very technical to try to beat around the bush. But for a long time, all of us knew what our gender was, for a very long time. So the next question follows is, should you be the one that determines if you're male or female? Should you as a person be the one that decides, I'm a male or I'm a female, or should there be some objective barometer which is standard and universal that we all know this is the basis of male and female? Of course, there are exceptions, meaning there are moments in history where you have unusual situation. You say the person is born with a defect. Yeah. So the person is, you might be an hermaphrodite, for example. So there are moments in life, if you have a factory and you're producing something on the conveyor belt, every now and again you have an anomaly. You have something that comes off the factory floor that is different, that deviated from the norm, from the standard. So we're not dealing with that area right now. We're talking about the norm. Yeah. So who, should you be the one to determine if you're male or female? Should others be forced to address you by your selected gender? If you decided that you're going to select your own gender, should other people be forced now to address you by your selected gender, not by what it might appears to be, but by what you tell them your gender is, even if it is contradictory to, what we might consider facts? Should laws be changed to facilitate your right to select your gender preference? Should children be taught that they can be any gender they choose? Should natural-born males who choose to be females be allowed to compete in female-only sports and vice versa? Should natural-born females who choose to be males be allowed to use male washrooms and vice versa? Or should you just have unisex washrooms, pretty much anybody goes anywhere and so on? So these are questions that we have been forced to contemplate now. Now, one of the things that guides many of us is the Bible and the Christian Bible. Another thing which guides some of us is the Muslims' Quran. Then you have other wisdom books like what the Buddhists use or what the Hindu use, and other variations. So there are all kinds of different religious material that guides people, that guides different culture, and so on. I'm not going to venture into using any kind of religious basis or reference to support any position of myself or of the United Independence Congress. I'm not going to try to use a religion to justify, because a religion is just that. It's a personal thing to you. So you can use that to guide your own personal decisions, but we cannot use any one religion as a basis for national governance, because a nation is a collection of people. And if that nation is a free nation, which we hope to make Jamaica, then you will have a mosaic of religious beliefs. So you don't want to try to make the nation's laws based on any particular religious text or any particular religious sect or religious group. You want to make sure that your laws are irreligious. It is not guided by any particular religion. It is guided by a set of core values and core principles that is universal to mankind. Niga Stoney says, "No, Mr. Patterson, the Bible is not a Christian book, sir. It's a Hebrew Yashraelite book, Black history." Fine. Whatever you think it is, I'm just pointing out that there are different religious material or spiritual material or material which has a deity or deities attached to it that guides people's thought processes and choices and behavior. You never want to build a country or live in a country where the laws are based on any religious text. I know that might sound strange, because if you're a Christian, you want the laws to be based on the word of God as you know it. If you're Hindu, you want the laws to be based on the word of whatever your God is, Krishna, And if you're a Buddhist, you want your laws to be based on the words of Buddha. The UIC is wise enough to encourage us to look outside of that and to embrace the fact that we are a mosaic of people, that we must respect the rights of everyone to their religious beliefs. and to make that a personal matter that is protected by law. So you don't get to use your religion as the basis to deny anybody else anything. We have to have some more structured moral principles that transcends your personal religion and anybody else's personal religion. And so the UIC's foundational philosophy is that every man has a right to be free. That's where we begin. Every man has a right to be free. You have a right to your personal sovereignty, and you also have a right to take personal responsibility for your choices. So foundationally, that's where we begin. Yeah. And needless to say, Mr. Patterson, that's true. Many religions and denominations and the Most High never intend so. Okay, so if we were to allow ourselves, we could have a massive debate here tonight about religion, but we're not going to do that. We're going to focus tonight on the fundamental principle of your right to be a free man and woman, and the role and responsibility of government to protect your right to your life, to your liberty, and to your property, provided you never engage in the use of force or fraud to infringe on the life, liberty, and property rights of others. So, for example, as a Christian, a system such as ours protects your right to worship the God you choose in the way that you choose, provided you do not use force or fraud to infringe on the life, liberty, or property rights of somebody else. It also ensures that your neighbor can worship the God that he or she chooses, so long as your neighbor doesn't use force or fraud to infringe on your life and your liberty or property. It means also that because of your freedom and your neighbor's freedom, you may not like what your neighbor does. You may not like the choices your neighbor makes. You may not agree with the morals of your neighbor. For example, your neighbor might choose to drink alcohol and you don't. Your neighbor might choose to smoke and you don't. Your neighbor might choose to speak a particular way or use certain choice words that you don't. But at the end of the day, that's the right of your neighbor. And as long as that neighbor does not violate your right to your life, liberty, or property by infringing on any of them using force or fraud, then such is life. Now, having said that, let's continue with this discussion now of the gender issue. So I've asked you some key questions here that should cause you to wonder. Why would anybody want to disrupt something that has gone on for years upon years, where we have all been very comfortable knowing clearly what defines our gender? And we weren't having any problems with this until a small group of persons, unbeknown to most of us, decide that they're going to push an agenda so aggressively, politically, to bring us to the place where we are today. In many other countries, or in some other countries, and gradually moving its way into Jamaica to become a problem here as well. Why are they doing this? And will our government allow this? Now, the next question is, what about your sexuality? Who decides your sexuality? Who decides what will be your sexual preferences? Yeah, who will decide that? Jojo says, I agree with this sentiments. They are the ones infringing on our rights by forcing this new world order on us. Quite so. So who is it that determines now our sexual preferences? Yeah, who decides our sexual preferences? Should you be free to choose who you're attracted to sexually, male or female? Should there be laws against or laws to protect same-sex couples' relationships? Are people born attracted to the same sex, or are they in that direction. Reasonable questions. Frankly, if you think about it, making a choice about who you're going to have sexual relations with is your personal choice. It might not be one that I like or I subscribe to, or you like or you subscribe to, but is it okay for people to make their own choices about who they want to have sexual relations with? Yes. Now, I would consider it quite unnatural based on our biology and our, the norms. I would consider it unnatural for a male to choose a male or a female to choose a female. That appears quite unnatural. Now, I may not agree with you making that choice, but it is your choice. Now, should there be laws against, or should there be laws to protect or even promote same-sex relationships? Now, that's a big question. Why would you need laws against same-sex relations? You would need a law against same-sex relations if, by engaging in same-sex relations, you are violating the rights of somebody else by using force or fraud to infringe on their life, their liberty, or their property. Now, I am hard-pressed to see that. Maybe you can help me to see if a person decides to engage in same-sex relations if they're violating somebody's rights, if they're two consenting adults. If, on the other hand, you're talking about children, you have another problem here. Now, should there be laws to protect same-sex couples? I don't see where that is relevant, because the laws must be there to protect every individual from anybody who wishes to use force or fraud against them. So you should not need any special laws designed to protect people who are engaging in a particular sexual relation. That's their business. So you don't need any special laws for that, unless there are reasons why persons are now going to be authorized by somebody else to engage in force or fraud against them. Then there's the question of, are people born attracted to same-sex? I have no idea. Can people be influenced into these kind of relationship? Quite possibly. In fact, people can be influenced into anything. If you have a concerted marketing campaign on any subject matter at all, persons can be influenced to even commit suicide. So yes, it's very possible and very likely that persons can be influenced. The question then becomes, what is the role of government in all of this? Now, I submit to you that government's only role in any of this is if there is any case where somebody is using force or fraud to violate the life, the liberty, or the property rights of somebody else. That is the key role of government in any free society. Is the government, is the person involved using force or fraud to get their way? If it's a mutual consent between two persons who are adults and able to make that decision on their own, there's no role for government except if somebody else decides that they're going to attack, beat, kill, or otherwise infringe on the life, liberty, or property rights of the individuals. I want to share with you the UIC's statement on the matter and tell me if you agree or disagree. So on this one, and by the way, I know this is a very touchy topic. I know it's difficult. So I want you to listen to me carefully, and I want you to think carefully about every word that I say. And after I read this for you, I'm going to read the UIC's position on this matter of gender, transgenderism, and homosexuality. And I want you to listen very carefully. And then at the end, you're going to type yes if you agree with the UIC's position, and no if you disagree, right? I think our politicians have done us a great disservice because they have played around with the issue. And I know why. They're playing around because they're not really interested in educating and elevating the people. They're just trying to find how they can implement what their colonial masters tell them to implement. So they're not really here trying to work with and build and elevate our people. They're just here trying to figure out how we can get this one through. And so for the last several years, you have seen where our politicians have been trying to see if they can nudge us in the direction of their colonial masters' agenda concerning homosexuality, and now gender, transgenderism, and before that even gender equality, because all of those things have intentions. It's not just what it appears on the surface, like gender equality. And so they've been playing with us for some time. The UIC doesn't play with you. The UIC wants to engage in a good intellectual understanding with the people of Jamaica, help us to rise to a level of understanding that allow us to have meaningful discourse and reach solid conclusions that are not based on emotions alone, or based on religious beliefs alone, or based on some other dogma. We want to have decisions that are based on reasoning, rational reasoning that seeks to build a consensus that allow us to engage each other and live with each other in peace and safety with a level of understanding that we may not have had before. Okay, so here's the UIC's position on this matter that I want you to kind of listen to carefully, and then you're going to vote yes if you agree and no if you disagree. So the UIC affirms that you should be free to choose what you want to do with your life, your body, and your property, provided you do not use force or fraud to infringe on the life, the liberty, or property rights of others. If, as an adult, you voluntarily choose to change your naturally assigned gender or to engage in mutually agreed same-sex relationships with consenting adults, those are your choices to make, and no one, no group, or no government has the right to use force or fraud to infringe on your life, liberty, or property rights because of your gender or sexual preferences. However, government has no legitimate authority to create special laws for you and your sexual preferences, or to engage in any attempt to influence others to embrace the same. Therefore, no tax dollars or public resources should be expended or utilized to promote unnatural sexual relations or unnatural gender identity. Those are personal matters over which the state has no jurisdiction if done voluntarily by and among consenting adults only. And that's the end. Do you want me to repeat it? If you agree, type yes. If you disagree, type no, so that we can get a feel for your understanding and appreciation of the subject, your position on the subject. Okay? So far we have JMH saying agree 100%. Magalina says yes. JMH says yes. PP says yes. Anyone else? Let me see others. Does the UIC recognize gay marriage? I want to respond to that after. For right now, we're just doing the yes and no, then we can talk about other pieces. So anybody else, if you agree with the statement, say yes. I'm scared and uncomfortable. Thank you, Jojo. Patricia says 100% in agreement. InfoHub says yes. Nika says yes. Jason Christie says yes. Cool Guy says, I totally understand. Sonia says, this sounds as if I said like pure confusion to me. Okay. All right. Desmond said yes. True Legend says in between. Christopher Lawrence says yes. Kimar says that's the best approach. Gangster Page says yes, I agree. That sounds like a law that could be in the Constitution. Thank you, JMH. And that's exactly the plan. As you know, the UIC is putting forward a new constitution for Jamaica that will protect our rights. Nika Stoney says, yes, I agree. So the majority of you agree, and there are some of you who do have some concerns, which is fine. That's a part of life. You're never going to get 100%. And one of the things, with the UIC, we don't have to agree on everything to work together. You're never going to have a 100% agreement for us to work together. But the UIC is very principled focus. We're driven by the fundamental values that our forefathers fought and died for. When Nanny of the Maroons was fighting the British, she was fighting for freedom. She was fighting for the right to self-determination. When Sam Sharp died on the gallows, exclaiming you'd rather die than live a slave, he was fighting for freedom, liberty. None of them were fighting just for our collective freedom. They were fighting for their individual freedom as well. Because the colonial powers, the colonial masters, never ever believed in the right for you to be a free man and woman. There's a dangerous aspect to governance that you need to understand, and here it is. If you build a governance model that allows the government to pick and choose which set of values that may be shared by some members of society and not necessarily by another, and they get to impose those values on everybody. At the time when they did it, it might be in accordance with your values and you may be happy with it. So let's say, for example, we should get a government that declares we are a Christian country, and therefore we're going to write a constitution that says we're a Christian country with Christian values. And you agree to that because you are a Christian and you sound lovely. Maybe let's say you are a Pentecostal Christian, and the flavor of the day, the ethos of the day, the mindset of the day was the government was a Pentecostal Christian government. But let's say after 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, it changes to a Catholic Christian government. And they now decide to impose their values on us. And let's say 5 years later, 10 years later, it changes to a Muslim government. Or 5 or 10 years after, it changes to an Hindu government. Or God forbid, one day it becomes an Antichrist government. You see what I'm saying? So what you want is a governance model that transcends all of that. A governance model that protects your right as an individual, the right to your life, the right to your liberty, and the right to your property. 3 things. The right to your life. So nobody has the right to use force or fraud to take your life. Nobody has the right to use force or fraud to take away your freedom, your liberty. Nobody has the right to use force or fraud to take away your property. If those rights are protected for you, the Christian, and it's also protected for the Muslim, and it's protected for the gay person, and it's protected for the lesbian person, and it's protected for the agnostic person, and it's protected for the atheist person. If that is protected, then you are fully protected, because you are free to pursue your religion. You are free to pursue your value system. You're free to speak out and share your values with others. And if because of your light, because your light so shines that all men can see how valuable your morals are, then they'll be drawn to you. You see, I know the church is always afraid of a government that doesn't work for unequivocally the church, but that's a wrong approach. What the church should want, and by church I mean any religion, Rastafarian for example, what they should want is a level playing field that allows them to demonstrate to everybody else that maybe you should become a Rasta, because look at, if they're allowed, just imagine if the Rastas weren't harassed and unjustly treated, and Pinnacle, the Pinnacle experiment, if that was allowed to flourish, and the Jamaican people looked at Pinnacle and say, wow, look at how beautiful that community has turned out. Leonard Howell did a great job and it's doing well. Then more people might flock to the Pinnacle and create more Pinnacles around Jamaica. Not by force, not by the government forcing us to go the way of Pinnacle, but by the government not interfering with a peaceful development where a group of Jamaicans decide that they wanted to live this way. They wanted to build a communal society that is fitting to their values, and they grow their food and they grow their family and show the rest of the nation how beautiful that is. Similarly, for a Christian home, the Christians are allowed to live and flourish and show why it's best to be a Jehovah's Witness, or why it's best to be a Mormon, or why it's best to be a Catholic, or why it's best to be an apostolic, or why it's best to be a Pentecostal, or why it's best to be a Seventh-day Adventist. Let us have a free market of ideas, a free market of thought. Let us allow ourselves to see each other and learn from each other. And if you see some people making bad choices and the results of those bad choices come out, then you can say, I don't want to be a part of that. I've seen the bad choices. Yeah. Now, True Legend is asking, how would the government handle radical religious beliefs? Remember, the foundation is, no matter what your beliefs are, no matter what your religion is, no matter what your practices are, you're not allowed to use force or fraud to infringe on anybody's life, liberty, or property. So let's say there's a church that is engaged in some radical practices, whatever you consider radical practices. The question is asked, is this church engaged in any practice whereby it uses force or fraud to infringe on the life, the liberty, or the property rights of its members? So let's say you join the church innocently. The church cannot force you to join it, and it cannot force you to, if you want to leave, it cannot force you to stay in it. So you're protected. Let's say the church has some practices where it violates the property rights of its members, like it confiscates your property. The law says, no, you can't do that. The person has to voluntarily part with their property, voluntarily. And so in this kind of governance, you are fully protected. Yeah. And Rise JA says, how will legislation define force and fraud? Great question. That, of course, would be a matter of legislation and discussion, right? In the parliament or the Congress in our case. But generally, force is where you're not having mutual voluntary agreement. So, for example, let's say we're dealing with the economy. Voluntary trade would be, I want to sell my accounting services and you agree to buy my accounting services. So I serve you and you agree to pay me $2,000 an hour for my services, for example, and we agree that that's what it is. That's voluntary. Now, if on the other hand, I decide to stick you up or go through a number of fraudulent activities to try to force you into an agreement with me, then that would be fraudulent and that would be use of force as well, right? So if I physically force you, I can't use force to define the matter. If I violate your freedom to say no, then that's force, right? It's like rape, for example. No means no. Whether you know the girl very well, whether you've been friends for several years, whether she wear a skimpy dress, whether she came to your room late at night, if she said no, no means no. You can't use any other pretext to say you thought that it was okay. If she said no, so that's an example of force. What category does brainwash fall into? All right, so great question, Nurse Brown. Brainwashing comes in a situation where you use force. So for example, this is very interesting. Think about this. In our school system that we have had in Jamaica, we have been forced by our government to learn a set of things that they want us to learn. And by extension, they brainwashed us. How did they do that? They took away your taxes, first of all, and then gave you free education. So they take away your taxes, and then they design a school system, of course not they, but their colonial masters, and dictated the curriculum and put you in it. That's force. And it violated your rights, but it was done in a way that you didn't even realize what was happening to you. But suppose on the other hand, you were free to choose any school you want to send your child to. And if you're being funded by the government to do so because you happen to be very poor, then the money would follow your choice as a parent. So whatever choice you made, you wanted to send them to Calabar instead of JC, then the money follows you to the school, for example. Then now your choice or freedom would have been protected there. All right, kind of straying a bit here, but I hope you understand. Good. So having said that, I've just gotten your feedback on the UIC's position on the gender and sexuality issue. Now I want to get your feedback on the UIC's response to globalization. But before I do that, I want to just point out to you quickly again what globalism is. It is a system of a system whereby some people want the world to be governed by their values and their agendas, and they want that to happen across national boundaries. A globalist is somebody who advocates for globalism or global governance, so a governance structure that is global. Now, I would prescribe to a global system where we no longer have national boundaries and we're free to go about our business, travel anywhere, do whatever. That would be fine if it's based on the model whereby we protect individual rights. If we don't protect individual rights, but then we give power to global institutions to do whatever they want with us, then we have a serious problem. So what's wrong with globalism? This is what's wrong with it. It seeks to remove national sovereignty and normally ends up violating your personal sovereignty as well. Examples of globalist agenda would be the World Economic Forum with their public-private partnership, or stakeholder capitalism, they call it, where you will own nothing and be happy. The truth is, it's not capitalism. It's really I hate to say this because it's so misunderstood, but it's really socialism repackaged and called capitalism because they know that you have been trained to hate the word capitalism. So they train you to hate the word capitalism because capitalism is really a free market economy where government is restricted from messing with you. But they have brainwashed us and flipped the script so that you hate what actually works and you want what actually doesn't work. And so you want now, they want you to be trained to want socialism, to want communism, to want globalism, to want something where they will be able to control you on the pretext that they're doing what is in the interest of all, the common good. So they call this the Great Reset Initiative, where you will end up owning nothing they say, but you'll be happy. Now, who will own everything? These gods. Now, you might recall in communism, the definition for that is that we hold all things in common, meaning you own nothing, the state owns you. The government or those who control the government owns you. That's really what communism is. Socialism is a transitory form of that, where you're transitioning from so-called capitalism by having government having a greater say in your life by virtue of regulation and taxes, to the end that is going to try to make us all equal. But in the end, what you're really doing is giving massive amount of powers to a few people to control your lives. So what they've done is to build some institutions now, nice sounding institutions, to carry us there. Some names are United Nations, World Health Organization, IMF, World Bank, central banking, international financial reporting standards, international court, and so on. All of these are geared towards guiding us to a world where some people who you don't even elect gets to set rules, standards, mandates, and enforce them upon you through your puppet governments, who really have given away your sovereignty, both your collective sovereignty as a nation and your individual sovereignty as a person. Now, here are some of the scary outcomes of all of that. Some really serious, scary outcomes exist. One of them is a globalized central bank, which you have all gotten used to. They have trained us so well that we don't even know what it means. Globalized central banking is where there are a small banking cartel that controls the entire global banking system in a way that would allow the powers that be to weaponize money and banking, weaponize monetary policy so that they can control nation states. So you saw when Russia misbehaved itself, then the global powers could say, okay, we're going to freeze you out of the monetary system. We're going to freeze your reserve that you have held with us to allow for trade, and so on. So they've weaponized that. So globalized central banking has been going on for years, and now we're seeing the full impact of that. Then there's cultural imperialism, which is really an attempt to bring us to a common set of collective values. But whose values? Who decide what the values are? Those are decided again by a small elite. So for example, if they decide that marijuana should be bad, then it's bad because they decided. And if one day they decide that marijuana is okay, or okay for certain things, or okay for certain countries, then it's okay because they get to set the standards. We don't have a say in that because they are the gods. And so if they say one day, hey, homosexuality is okay, so pass laws in your country that says you're going to protect homosexuals, you're going to approve gay marriages, you're going to push for transgenderism, then that's what happened. So that's what makes globalism so dangerous, because you've lost control over your country, you've lost control over your culture, because they get to decide what that is. Then there are global mandates. For example, mandated injections, like they tried to do the other day. They tried to push through and to get as many persons on it as possible, even if the science doesn't back it up, even if the facts are not facts, even if the information given to get you to take it was fraudulent. Nobody goes to jail because the global gods said it. Same thing with NIDS. If they say we want to push through laws in your country where we put you on an identification system where we can track you like a cattle, and we can, map you and have all of your vital statistics right down to your DNA, so that we can use that for whatever nefarious purposes we may have, they get to do that. These are the scary things about globalization if it doesn't come with respect for your individual sovereignty, which it never will. Because those who are pushing for globalization, they're not interested in your personal sovereignty. They're interested in being able to manipulate you and use you for whatever ends they have in mind. So for example, if the end is to control the population, I don't know, they will have the power to do that. If the end is to make us all dependent on a particular drug, I don't know, they'll do that. If the end is to get us to all conform to some particular cultural norms, which might be against your personal or religious values, they'll do that. So you must never allow a system that takes away your individual rights, even if it sounds good and sounds as though it is in line with your personal views, because the same knife that stick sheep. If you give them the right now because it fits in with your personal narrative, you may find yourself on the other side later on, which is what happened to the people of Germany when they thought that, Hitler was okay until it finally turned out that he wasn't okay, right? So this kind of process end up with, NIDS, the central bank digital currency, which is very dangerous. I've spoken on that before. It's really a method of control. You end up with various laws as well and regulations forced on nations to force them to open their markets to big business from other countries while unfairly restricting your products from going into their markets. You have the brainwashing of citizens by controlling their education system, their news media, their healthcare system. You have the spreading of GMO seeds that wipes out organic seeds and make your farmers dependent. You have pesticides and herbicides pushed in and fertilizers, artificial pushed in that kills off local farming and other sectors. You have climate change agendas where they tell you the sky is falling and get you to conform to certain things, which end up tying your hands, like you can't even have a backyard garden anymore. So we are, treading on some very dangerous grounds here that we have to be careful about. The gender equality conflicts, the gender identity confusion, the political destabilization that they may cause to overturn a regime so they can set up one that they want. So it's really colonization all over again under a new name. And by the way, it's not capitalism. So don't let them fool you in becoming a hater of capitalism when it's not capitalism. This is about dictatorship. This is about totalitarianism. It is about control. It is not about, free markets being dangerous and that stuff, right? So I'm running out of time. I have 2 minutes to jump to another meeting. So in the end, here's what I want you to vote on now. I want you to vote on the UIC's response to globalization. So I'm going to read it for you, the UIC's response. And you tell me if you agree with the UIC's position on globalization. Okay, so hope you're ready for it now. Listen up carefully. I have to read it quickly. The UIC affirms the right of everyone to their individual sovereignty and the right of every country to their national sovereignty. Any global alliance entered into must never be permitted or allowed to override our individual or collective sovereignty. Nations are but a collection of individuals, and all adult individuals must be free to voluntarily trade with each other within their country and with those of other countries to the mutual satisfaction of the transacting parties. As such, the UIC subscribes to a free and fair local and global market economy where all are free to trade value for value with each other, and where none, be they individuals, corporations, or governments, are allowed to use force or fraud to get their way in any transaction. Type yes if you agree with the UIC's approach to globalism, and type no if you disagree. Okay? So let me know what your position is on that. Do you agree with our position on globalization, or do you disagree? So yes, if you agree, or 100%, JMH is saying. Jason Christie says yes, thank you very much. True Legend says yes. Leo Lord says yes, I agree with UIC. Gangsta Page says yes. Many people here say yes, I'm seeing a lot. Magellan, InfoHub, Stoll Meyer, I think that's Mr. Myrie. Great. So far, I have not seen any no's coming up. So it seemed like we have hit the right note there, and you have understood very well. So in closing, I want to remind us of the core philosophy of the UIC, which guides everything that we do, everything. I want you to realize something about the UIC, that we're not an ordinary political party. You see, every political party and all the politicians, they want to get into power to have power over you. The UIC wants to get into power to give you back your power. We want to give you back what belongs to you. We want the power to reside in your hands. So when you elect us, you're actually electing yourself. You're electing a government that is going to reform the system so that what your foreparents died for, what our African ancestors lost, in fact, even before they lost it to the Europeans, much of our African ancestors had lost their freedoms because they lived under kings and queens. They lived under monarchs. The UIC is against all forms of monarchy, whether it's a black monarchy or a white monarchy. We believe in the sovereignty of the individual, and the government exists only, that's its number one purpose, to protect your individual sovereignty. That's the number one thing. Everything else is brought up. It must protect your sovereignty so that you have the full opportunity to realize your maximum potential. So that's why the UIC focuses on a safe environment for you, a clean environment for you, an orderly environment for you. That's why we want every community to look, smell, and feel like a tourist resort. That's why we want to take all the crown lands, all the government lands that are not needed for offices and so on for the government. All of those lands must be returned to you, the individual citizens, so that there's no Jamaican family that is not a property owner. We believe that that land is yours. It must be returned to you free of charge to give you the leg up that you need to build on. Just imagine if every Jamaican family in 1962 had been given back the land that was stolen from their ancestors. Nobody would be homeless. Nobody would be a squatter unless they decided to be completely worthless. But all the reasonable, smart, decent Jamaicans would have had property, and they would have built their homes on this. So the UIC has a policy that's going to make every Jamaican a property owner. We're going to create an environment so that you can live to your full capacity, because we make it safe, clean, and orderly, and protect your rights. So, in closing, the fundamental philosophy in a nutshell, we have a longer statement, but in a nutshell, you have a right to do whatever you want with your life, with your liberty, and with your property, provided you do not use force or fraud to infringe on the life, liberty, or property rights of others. This applies in the community, it applies in the country, and it should also apply globally. Thank you very much for your time tonight. I look forward to our next meeting together. Have a good night, and remember, one Jamaica, stronger together. Please come out on June 10th, 4 p.m., Mandela Park, Halfway Tree, where a whole ton load away go and gather to say enough is enough. We the people demand good governance now. Please rate the program, say whether you like it or not, and give any comments. And remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe so we can maximize our reach to all of Jamaica. Thanks again and have a good night. Take care.